Hi, everyone. Welcome to Venture Northeast Currents, a podcast where we explore the challenges and opportunities facing pastors and church leaders across the Northeast. So today's conversation kind of hits close to home for many of us, self included. Ministry is filled with so many good opportunities, good people, real needs, meaningful moments. But somewhere along the way, many of us find ourselves just overextended, overwhelmed, and kind of speaking from the heart here, quietly exhausted. Not because we're doing the wrong things, but we're saying yes to too many of the right things. So we're calling today's podcast, the episode, Dying by a Thousand Yeses, because that's often how it happens. Not one dramatic collapse, but a slow erosion of margin and clarity and calling. And so today, joining us on the podcast is Dr. Gregg Makin from the Makin Institute. Dr. Makin has spent years helping leaders develop clarity, health, sustainability in their calling. And he brings both deep insight, practical wisdom to one of the most pressing leadership issues pastors are facing today: when to say no. Hey, Gregg, it is so good to have you on the podcast today.
Hey, it's great to be here, Doug. Thanks so much. And I'm just really excited about this opportunity to be able to talk with you about these vitally important issues. And like you, I can so identify and have found myself here way too many times saying yes when I should have been saying no.
Gregg and I go way back. Gregg, let's see. I think I was a sophomore, you were a junior, and we were RAs at Chenawana. You were on the second floor, I was on the third floor. You were with Jordan, and I was with Tim Nichols, and we were RAing together. And I couldn't say no then. I'm still I'm still having troubles. And that was a lot of years ago. All
Yes.
right. So let me just ask you a real basic question. Why do so many of us, so many pastors, have such a struggle to say no, even when they know they're overextended? What's up?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a part of it that we're feel like we may be disappointing God. But I think if we're honest, we also maybe we're kind of losing people's favor. People don't like to hear no's. Maybe there's another point of just letting them down. And I think there's even an element of being selfish, like we need to say yes, right? And then finally, maybe we have this kind of identity. Well, real shepherds never say no.
Yeah, and man, that is so. Yeah, you and me, we've talked about this a lot because you've been kind of my coach, my mentor, my counselor through these last several years. You've been helping me. So, what's the difference between trying to be faithful and being available to everyone all the time? And that's often the struggle, right? Our
Yeah.
phones are on all the time, and we're
hmm
always taking phone calls.
hmm
So,
Yeah.
yeah, how do you discern between those two?
Well, let me go back to always being available as far as phones on. I mean, there's something that feels really good. I mean, we feel really needed, really wanted, very valued, right? Because of what we offer to other people. So there's something that on the inside, if we're really, really honest, that we really like about being so needed. But let me go back to your question, the faithfulness piece, right? I think that's obedience to God's assignment.
Yeah,
And sometimes that has to be really specific and narrow, like what is our actual mission?
yeah,
Whereas I think the idea of availability to everyone all the time, maybe this unconscious wish or attempt to be godlike, like omnipresent, and it feels really, really good.
yeah, yeah. That's it. It's so crucial to understand the difference. There is a huge difference. Yeah, we answer to God first,
And,
and
and also, Jesus wasn't always available. We get
yeah,
this impression, right? But
yeah,
he withdrew.
yeah,
He disappointed crowds that he's like, no, we're moving on.
yeah,
There were many needs left unmet, and he actually didn't heal everybody.
yeah.
I remember one time picking up a missionary, and he said he was doing God's business, and therefore that meant he didn't need to take care of his family, right?
Ooh,
So he was always on for everybody all the time.
yeah,
But I was kind of curious, like, what scripture says that we neglect the things that are first and foremost, and
yeah.
we end up saying yes to things that are really good, but that are not really from God.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. So how do we as ministry leaders discern? Because that's the discernment is what we need
Yeah.
in figuring out what I'm supposed to be doing, the opportunities that are truly from God, and just those that are kind of distracting us from the calling that God has for us. And what are some of the ways in which we can begin to discern those things?
Yeah. Well, I think you started at a great place. Does this align with God's mission that He's given for me with this congregation at this time? And sometimes we get a little bit of confusion because we see other churches doing this and other
Mm,
pastors doing that. And and so we end up kind of looking and comparing, well, we need to be doing all of that. Well, the reality is that there's only one of you, Doug, there's only one of me. And
yeah,
so what is that mission that God has given to us, called us to with that church for that given time? So that's kind of on the top of my list.
yeah,
But the other thing is I get sometimes confused as what's mine and what's theirs. Is that their burden, their backpack to carry, and I'm carrying it for them?
yeah.
Or if that's a piano, is that mine? Or is that part of something that the church body or a small group
Mm,
is able to carry that with them as opposed to me having to carry it?
yeah. Yeah. And it's hard, I think it's hard for us pastors sometimes, especially young pastors, coming into a brand new situation, and there are heaps, piles of expectations. Maybe it's from what the last guy did. And that gets heaped upon you, and there are expectations from the congregation leadership of what you are going to be doing in your role, and that doesn't
Yes.
help.
No, no. So we have all of those. And then we also have expectations for that particular family. Are they big givers? We've been here, we were the founding members, or like we're really involved and we're leadership, and there's those expectations that come from them. And so all of those together, often when we come into a church, we're pretty unaware of most of those because nobody wants to come up front and say, hey, by the way, this family over here, they're going to need lots of your time and your attention. Do not neglect them and don't tick them off. And so all of a sudden, it's an unwritten expectation. And there are probably dozens of those.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own expectations. Like, I didn't like the last guy, so I'm hoping you're going to visit more. Or I love the last guy. I hope you're just like him. And so, oh, I have kids in the youth group. I hope you're going to minister to them while you're at it. But I also have some single people I'm concerned about. Are you going to take care of them? And then the list gets longer and longer of all of their expectations, and there's literally hundreds of them.
I remember coming here 36 years ago, 37 years ago now, and one of the first things was given to me was a list, had to be at least 50 to 75 people on the list, of people who had left the church in the last 10 years, and said, will you call these people? They're all attending other churches now, but we'd like to get them back. We'd like you to get them back. And and fortunately, I was 27 at the time, and fortunately, I had the wherewithal to say, no, that's
Mm,
reaching the already reached, reaching those who have
yes,
already left us and
yes,
gone elsewhere to another church that's not
yes.
high priority for me. So I did have the wherewithal. Here's the question. How do you know what are some of the early warning signs that we're getting in too deep and we're dying by a thousand yeses? Are there signals that we ought to be aware of within ourselves of when we're overcommitted?
Yeah, because I don't have the emotional gas. It's one of like maybe it's the physical gas. I become kind of irritable with the
Mm.
very people that I'm serving.
Ugh, yeah, right there. Yeah. Okay, that's
And they're like a bit annoying.
yeah,
Another thing is inside, and this is so hard for all of us to, but especially pastors, just to listen and to be quiet.
yeah,
But inside, am I becoming resentful? And I'm kind of hoping and wishing and praying that people will be a bit more appreciative of all the work that I'm doing. After all, I am giving 150% and I'm exhausted.
yeah.
Another one is that my family. God or even myself get the leftovers.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I've heard that one quite a few times in my own
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
Another one is that, is there any joy? Or is it just more obligations and shoulds and musts? Sometimes I would fantasize about being a garbage because he would come
Right.
by, pick it up, dump it, and then he was done with his day and there was nothing else.
There are days I just want to go work at Home Depot. Just,
Yes,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I know for some guys, and they do this, they start over.
Yeah.
And so they leave a church every few years.
Yeah.
Um, and let's be honest, there's probably, and we don't really talk about this as pastors, but there's probably a fair amount of numbing with things like food, could be drink, could be screens, it could be busyness, spending. And there's a whole list of secret self-soothing behaviors that,
Mm.
we don't really want to talk about that, but that would be really, really true.
Yeah.
And then the final one is that I can't receive care from somebody else without feeling guilty.
Yeah.
And like, oh no, no, I'm good. I'm just a servant of the Lord. And so I can't even take in anything that someone might actually want to give me.
Yeah. Boy, yeah, that one stings right there for me. Yeah. Yeah. I don't deserve, I don't deserve somebody else's affirmation when I don't feel like I've really measured up. And yeah, um,
And let me just pause on that. That's so important. I really appreciate your honesty because I haven't measured up. I haven't earned and let's be honest, their approval.
yeah.
And I think most every pastor struggles with that
Yeah.
because I think inside we want people to notice us and see how hard we're working and how much we give and give and give and give. And it feels really good when they stand up and they give a testimony about, Pastor, you changed my life.
Yeah.
And there's a part of that that feels like, oh, yes, we're finally seen and we're finally celebrated for what we're doing.
Mm, yeah. You know, at least it is for me, and I'm sure this is for much of the audience today. Um, the whole topic of people pleasing, the whole problem of people pleasing is perhaps at the heart of a lot of this. And let's just talk about that for a minute. Why is it so
Hmm.
dangerous? And how do you know you suffer from that? And again,
Yeah.
I think the problem for many of us pastors is we're not emotionally aware enough to realize that's going on
Mhm.
within ourselves, that we're just
Yeah.
we're trying
Yeah.
to measure up.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about people pleasing for a minute here.
Yeah. If we're honest, it disguises itself as false humility.
Mm,
Oh, it's nothing. Let's just give all the credit to God. Or it shows up as servanthood or servility, right? Or compassion, or I'm the good shepherd. And so it kind of disguises that, which makes it look kind of nice. And people love it when we serve and we
yeah,
help and we meet their needs and we take care of them and we're there for them and we're always available for them for whatever it is that they need in their life. And so it actually feeds us.
yeah.
And that's one of the dangers, right? Over in Ezekiel, I think it's 39. And God is saying about that the shepherds have been feeding on their sheep.
Mm,
And there
mm,
are times in my own life and ministry
mm,
that I actually got my emotional and relational needs met from others.
mm,
And I could be a really, really good helper.
mm.
And it felt really good. I mean, after all, Pastor Gregg, you're the pastor that really, I actually heard this, kind of laugh, but you're the pastor that really, really cares. Oh, oh, no, 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 we all care. But inside, and so what ends up happening is we can then start taking too much responsibility for people's emotions and
Mm,
well-being and their happiness.
mm,
And that instead of equipping the saints to do some of that heavy lifting, instead of helping them grow, we end up taking on a little bit too much of their stuff.
mm,
And so what ends up happening is there's this somewhat of an unhealthy church system that relies far too much on us unhealthy pastors
mm.
who are depleted, exhausted, burnout, maybe even resentful.
Mm. And this is so important, I think, because it is the difference, right, between a short ministry career and a long, healthy career that, you know, your wife is happy and you're happy and you grow old together happy. And this right here is kind of the difference. So how do you let's just for a minute here talk about this. I want to do two things. I want to talk about this theology of limits, theology of boundaries. Um, and then I want to talk about kind of the application of it and what pastors can do, maybe even what boards, overseers, elders can do for
Mhm.
the pastor. And I was just at a conference yesterday. I've got some good ideas, what they said that they did at their church. So let's talk about that. But let's just first talk about the theology of limits for a moment, the theology of boundaries.
Yeah. So the fact is, we're creatures, not the creators.
Mm,
And so, unlike God, is that He made us to need Him and to need others and have limits. So we have finite capacities physically. We have these other relational and emotional needs and limits. Um, Many have families and other responsibilities and things outside of just the church family. And so sometimes we think of limits as failure, but they're just evidence that we're human.
right.
And so I love the fact that Jesus embraced all of his. He took naps in boats. He chose 12 people, not thousands of people. He left towns and he entrusted people to do the work of the ministry.
Mm,
And it actually, when we try to do it all, it goes against how God designed the body, right?
mm,
So if I try to be the whole body, I don't need anything. Well, it never really becomes interdependent like it's designed to be. One of my first pastors he worked 7 days a week and he was there for everybody. But the body didn't grow and it didn't do the work of the ministry because he was busy doing it all.
mm,
And so when he stopped doing that, when he left, I think it was a real invitation of the congregation to start growing and maturing and growing up instead of being infants.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that is so helpful for pastors to remind ourselves of the boundaries Jesus put in place for himself. It kind of feels like I can give myself a little bit of rest as well. Um,
Mhm.
so how do we legitimately, logically apply that for ourselves? Um, I've got some ideas on this too, of
Mhm.
of what we need to do. What would be some of the things on your list of ways how to do this?
Yeah. Um, well, I think one of the hardest things is just being able to say no.
Hmm.
And there can be a lot of inner turmoil around that for us. Some of us grew up in homes where we didn't say no. The only answer was yes, or when do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
And so we became very compliant. And so our no muscle really not didn't get navigated.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I needed along the way is I needed to find some good relationships, some safe people
Hmm.
that they were okay with my no and
Yeah.
with my limits. And it helped me to be able to say no to this because when I say no to this, I can say yes to this. But if I say yes to that, that also probably means I can't say I'm going to end up saying no to this over here.
Yeah.
And so those were some of the ways that I had to learn what my no's were and what my yeses were, and then to get some support from some safe people.
Yeah.
Again, people that wouldn't be like, oh, Pastor Greg, I mean, it's so disappointing you're not more available for what everybody needs. And so there were people that could honor my no's and my yeses that helped me to get stronger on the inside.
Yeah. You will be very proud of me, Greg, because last Friday, my day off, friend friend from the church called. I thought he was calling to ask me to play golf. He called me and started talking to me about church stuff. And I called it quits. And I said, guess what? This is my day off. And I don't want to talk about this topic right now. because this is my one day not to think about church stuff.
Oh,
And and he honored that. And
hmm.
but that felt
Yes,
good. It really felt
yes.
good to to
Ah,
to set that boundary in place.
yes,
So
because you're not Superman and God didn't make
yeah,
us to be superhuman and we have limits. We need rest. We need time off. We need to get refreshed. We need to get refueled physically, emotionally, spiritually. And that doesn't happen if we're doing.
yep, yep. Some other things, I'm thinking on the other side of things, the things we should be saying yes to that provide refreshment to our souls. One for most of us is probably date night with our wives. That should be like a no-brainer every week, a date night. I was at a conference yesterday at a church where they actually give a gift to their pastor every year, $2,500 gift over and above his salary
Mm,
for a getaway, $2,500 for a getaway for his wife, he and his
mm,
wife, just the two
hmm.
of them,
Hmm.
not the kids, but just he and his wife
Yeah,
to get away. And I thought, that is so nice. A
yeah,
$2,500 stipend to just take off and spend time with your your helpmate.
yeah,
Man,
yeah.
that's a blessing,
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And I have to admit, my wife has actually given me a double blessing. And so we just came back from one of those. Again, no kids and no grandkids, as much as I love them. And you may have heard them in the background in the house. But also is that her and I have talked about times that each of us need to be away
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Some time just to reconnect, to search me and know me, God, and
Yeah.
see if there's any anxious or wicked way in me. And then again, come to me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
Yeah.
And so, one of the really nice gifts that Joyce has given me over the years is just this kind of a free get out of jail card or a free pass card to go away for 2, 3, even sometimes 4 days. And it's not to a conference, it's not to be with anybody else. It's just to get away so I could recover. And there's so many instances of Jesus doing that. They
Yeah.
would go to a mountaintop, and he would withdraw to a lonely place for him to get refreshed. I think in so many ways. And so those are a couple of things. The other thing that has been really helpful in my journey, and I didn't really find this until I think it was about 46 and I hit a wall and my life quit working. And for 4 months, it was the worst depression. And I'm not a depressed guy for those
Mm,
that know me. But there was something that was amiss underneath the hood that was going on, and I had quit paying attention to it. And it was God's wake-up call to it's like there's something here that needs addressing.
mm,
And that was beginning of for me, and I know it feels like a dirty word to most
yeah.
pastors because it means we need help.
Yeah.
But that's 20 years ago, I started therapy. As
Yeah.
a part of that, I've also had a coach in my life.
Mm,
I've also had a life team. These are people that were outside the church that were safe, could be trusted, that I could really be me, and we could have this different kind of relationship than what I needed to show up on a Sunday morning.
yeah.
And so all of those have helped me to grow on the inside. And one of the many benefits is being able to say no, as well as to say yes to these other things that are really important.
Yeah. I tell you, that's invaluable, right? I- you know my very best friend very well too, Keith, who and the blessing for my friend Keith is that he's outside of the church, so I can actually tell him all the good, bad, mostly the ugly, and
Mhm.
and he doesn't know anybody, so it's kind of good for me to vent a little bit to somebody who's outside of that frame of reference a little bit, and
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
he sometimes he's the guy who's
Yeah.
sometimes he's the guy talking me down off the ledge, but other times
Yes.
he's just the guy who's speaking encouragement into my life. And
Because that is
yeah,
so much for us to carry alone. And
yeah,
sometimes, again, we have to have this impression of onward Christian soldiers that we got to bear it alone, right?
right.
And yet the reality is, if you look at Paul's life, he talks about it in the middle of one of the books to the Church of Corinth. that he's exhausted, he's overwhelmed, and he
Yeah.
said he's got, in the messages, I've got fears on the inside and worries on the outside.
Mm,
And he said, I was refreshed by the coming, I believe it was of Titus.
mm.
And then just that, and then Titus told him about the longings of the church and how much they wanted to see him and how much they wanted to be with him. And so there was this really cool thing that God did is that God brought him comfort and he brought him support and all that he needed through the coming of Titus and even through the church, and that he could receive from them
Yeah.
some of those, I call them relational nutrients,
Mm,
and that help rejuvenate him, bring him back to life, being able to go back to ministry. But he needed help too.
yeah. I want to get back to that question about the leadership, the elders, and what role they play in helping protect a pastor from overcommitment, because um, they can't be part of the problem. They got to be part of the solution,
Yeah.
to protect their pastor from being overcommitted. Um, I think most of the pastors I know um, fail in not undercommitment but overcommitment. So
Yes.
so how does an elder's board um, help the pastor? Again, not being the problem but being part of the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have to admit, over the years, I've had some not so good instances of elders really not looking out. And it doesn't mean that my interests have to trump the church's, right?
Right.
I'd like a 2 year sabbatical. Can you guys pay for it too? No, none of those things. But there was a couple of requests. And instead of them saying, let's talk more about that, I actually got shamed. Well, my brother's a pastor, and he would have never asked for that. Remember, Greg, you're here as a servant, da 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 kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I had been serving, and there wasn't a safe place there for them to be able to hear my heart and to hear the weariness or the burden that I was carrying.
Yeah.
So I would make sure that indeed there is somebody there that can do some of that. That's why some having a coach, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
somebody else outside can be really, really helpful. But maybe across the board, as the leadership goes, is that again, are there things already in place for a day off, at least one,
Yeah.
right? Or vacations and Sabbaths? Have they set up clear criterion for what gets yeses as opposed to maybe the loudest or the members that give the most or these or da 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 and those people? Are they okay saying no and disappointing other people? And can they still support you even when you say no, to
Mm,
be able to do that?
mm.
Then also, are they helping us to kind of share ministry? It's instead of a pastor-centered ministry that we end up doing all of the work. And are they committed to that as opposed to, well, that's just your job, pastor?
Mm.
And so those are some of the kinds of things, and maybe even occasionally, like, let me just check in to see how are you doing? And is there anything that you're carrying that we could carry, the
Yeah.
church needs to carry, or that's just really not yours at all to carry, Greg?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, because I think that's something that a lot of elders boards probably don't do, is just check in with the pastor. Years ago I kind of learned I needed to look at kind of the gauges in front of me, and
Yeah,
my spiritual gauge and emotional gauge and physical gauge, and how do the gauges look, and maybe elders just need to pay more attention to asking those kinds of questions to the pastor. Just,
yes.
again, not for trying to beat him down or anything, just saying, where can we come alongside you and help fill up your tanks
Yeah,
in
yeah.
those areas?
Because it's so easy for us to blow by all of those signals. And again, I mean, just be honest, there's a few times I felt like a martyr, right? This is
Yeah,
my cross to bear, and this is what would make Jesus in the church and everybody else happy. And so I just ignored those kinds of things. And yet having somebody just stop and just say, Greg, you just look at and sound exhausted.
yeah, yeah.
And it helps me to give permission to myself to just name the reality of what they already see that's already there.
All right. So here's here's our last question then. What if? What if a pastor realizes they are already past the point of being burned out? They're not it's not a brownout, it's a they're a burn that's full on burned out right now from
Yeah,
saying yes to too many things.
yeah, yeah,
What are the first steps towards recovery?
yeah. Well, the first is to stop spiritualizing exhaustion.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm busy, too busy. I got a lot going on. I mean, it feels kind of good. And
Yeah.
then people are impressed by that. Wow, our our pastor's really, really busy. The next piece would be tell someone safe, which we've talked about. I'm just not just tired, I'm exhausted. And that often means, again, finding some outside support, which is hard for us to do, but to get some help from somebody, again, a coach, spiritual director. I also actually have a life group. And again, it could be other pastors. And it was such an important part of my life when I was in Long Island to have some other pastors that I could be real. I didn't have to edit with them, and they could accept me just as I was. And then two last things was, why do I keep saying yes? So part of that saying no, and maybe another thing is just say, hey, let me just check on my calendar, pray about it, and I'll get back to you. And then the final one is just recover these rhythms,
Yeah.
whether it's sleep, our diet, our movement, exercising, connection with God. Um, and again, back to this life team and life group that I talked about, learning to be loved when I don't produce,
Yeah. Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
have nothing to give to the other person.
Amen. Amen. So as we're wrapping up today's conversation here, the tension of what to say yes to, what to say no to, um, maybe the question coming out of our episode today is not so much um, what do I say no to, but rather what is God actually asking of me in this season? What are the true goals and objectives He wants me uh, to actually accomplish? That's a whole nother episode probably. We should have a conversation around how do you begin to establish those godly goals for yourself in the
Mhm,
next quarter or the next year? Um,
mhm.
because all of your yeses should then kind of flow into those goals or flow through those goals. So, boy,
Yes.
this has been a great conversation
Yeah.
today, and I think we got to dig a little deeper on some of these issues, Greg. So I hope you'll be back with us for another episode here.
Well, it's been great being with you, Doug. Thanks so much for having me. And again, for anybody out there, if you'd like to reach me, I'm sure Doug will leave you some contact information because my heart for 39 years, while I was in ministry, is I wanted people like this in my life. I
Yeah,
needed them.
yeah.
And so if I could be there to support you, to come alongside you in some of the challenges, I love the opportunity to do that.
And here's what you bring to the table, Greg. You know what ministry is like in the Northeast because you were a pastor here in the Northeast. So you get it. And yeah, I'd love to give that information out. And like I said, we'll be having you back in the future on these podcasts. So again, thanks for listening. We'll see all of you next time. God bless.